have Ukrainian armed forces crossed a major Russian defensive line and prepared for their attack on Verbova, but has a significant Ukrainian ally cut off arms and ammunition? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's September 21st, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first we're taking a look at the control map. The biggest change here is just to the south of Robdina. You can see Russian forces falling back just a little bit. Not really any significant territory changing hands, right? No windbreaks, no big defensive positions. My suspicion is that this is probably a function of maybe additional mine clearing or repositioning of forces, maybe some sort of preparatory efforts preparing for a subsequent attack in the Novoprokopivka direction. But when we go over to the combat map, you can see that, again, the biggest news is that there's been a real dearth of updates, right? You could see just a smattering of artillery fire, just 23 combat engagements by Russia. Again, it's almost a 30% reduction from the median number of around 33, 34 on a typical day in the last month or so. So a real sign that perhaps things are not looking great for Russia's combat power. You can see those efforts are focused on Andriivka and Klachivka, two recently lost villages that some reports indicate that Russia is very desperate to get back. Now, if you're curious about the footage from some of this fighting, I'm going to be doing a breakdown of it today on combatvetnews.com. This is my website because YouTube and Patreon will not let me show any combat footage. Anything involving a weapon firing will get me demonetized. So I've moved it over here, and twice a week we look at the viral combat footage coming out of the front lines. It gives us insight we can't get anywhere else. Sometimes we can triangulate, sometimes to the street where the fighting is taking place. So it really is the best way to get insight into the frontline operations. And more importantly, it's the best way to support the channel. So if you're interested in keeping me independent and sticking it to YouTube and their weird policies, you can become a member. Any one of these tiers gets you access to the members only section. And I can't even show you the thumbnails of the members only content or else I'll get demonetized. That's how strict YouTube has become. So thanks to everybody, of course, that has supported us. And of course, it also gets you access to an exclusive room on the Discord if you're a Discord guy and want to join the conversation. There's also a bunch of free rooms on the Discord. So check us out at combatvetnews.com. Link is in the description or probably right up there. Now, here's what I thought was most interesting. According to X, the rumor mill, it reportedly, Ukraine has managed to get heavy equipment like Strikers. It's sort of heavy equipment, and mine trawlers and Bradleys behind Russia's anti-tank ditches and Dragon's Teeth to the west of Verbova. Now, why is this significant? Well, what you have is, you can see here is a map of the two Russian defensive lines, right? And up until this point, this area has been crossed by infantry units, light infantry. And likely what the light infantry have been doing is, instead of pushing hard into Verbova, they've been probably trying to hold the line here and clear paths through these mined areas. And once they have an adequate number of cleared and marked paths free of anti-tank mines, then they can bring up the their heavier equipment, tanks, Strikers, APCs, because once they are near Verbova, right, the chances they are going to be within striking distance, so to speak, right? You want to get close enough that you can use rapid devices like your Mikliks to clear holes to get you to Russian positions. But you've got to do the prep work first, and you've got to clear mine paths that are wide enough to allow vehicles to both advance and retreat. So that's been the role of just Ukrainian light infantry, right? With little or minimal support this whole time. And now that some Ukrainian forces are able to get their armored vehicles through, the belief is that they'll be able to really bring to bear a lot more firepower onto Russian forces occupying Verbova. So this may be a preparatory phase or some of the final preparations for the assault on Verbova, which, as we've talked about. So here's some relatively grainy Twitter grade footage of purportedly some Bradleys. Wow, this is terrible footage. You can see they're kind of moving past these Dragon's Teeth formations. You can see that there is some sort of cleared or marked path that they're moving through very carefully. I think that's pretty standard mine clearing type of operations. Now, the other news that's less good for Ukraine is that Poland has said they're no longer supplying weapons amid a conflict over grain. And here's the gist of it. Poland has given a lot of weapons to Ukraine. And basically what they've done is taken, similar to the United States, old stock weapon systems, Soviet-era tanks, MiG fighters, and they've provided that to Ukraine. This works well for both parties because Poland wants to upgrade its existing fleet of military hardware, and Ukraine obviously is going to prefer military hardware that it already knows how to operate, and Soviet-era weapon systems will very much like that. But the other problem is that both Poland and Ukraine have robust grain industries. Now, Ukraine normally exports its grain to countries outside the EU, while Poland can remain inside the EU. And they sell to different markets, meaning that Poland and Ukraine aren't necessarily direct competitors in the grain industry. The problem is, with Ukraine unable to export grain, now all Ukrainian grain basically is going to Poland or Poland and other EU countries. This is a problem for Polish grain farmers who, as you know, with supply and demand, if there's a sudden flood of supply, it's going to push the price of grain down, meaning that Polish farmers will be making a lot less money. So Poland has said, hey, we need to find a workaround that protects our grain farmers. And Ukraine has said, no, we need to sell our grain, because if we don't, we won't have the money to sustain this war effort. It's, selling grain is life or death for us. So they're sort of at an impasse, and Poland has said, hey, we will continue to provide the transfer point, right? As you know, a lot of arms weaponry comes through Poland into Ukraine from Polish territory, and the Polish government operates it by and large. So that's going to remain in place. Existing contracts will be fulfilled, including some Crab artillery systems and some additional armaments and ammunition. But going forward, it looks like there's going to be a lot fewer contracts and aid provided by Poland to Ukraine. Now, bear in mind, a lot of right-wing sources are beating the bell, so to speak, and saying that this is a huge hit for Ukrainian aid. And don't get me wrong, maintaining the unity of their allies is important, but just take a look at this chart here. Right. As of August, the Ukraine has provided about $46 billion in military aid, Germany about $20 billion, the UK about $8 billion, Norway $4 billion, Denmark $4 billion, Poland $3 billion. Right. So you can see that while proportionately Poland has been a massive supplier of aid, it simply is in the grand scheme of things represents a few percentage points, really, 5-6% of Ukraine's military aid. And don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted. $3 billion in stuff is a lot of stuff. But I think it's going to be this is going to be a debate where I think these allies want to see it smoothed over. They want to see this relationship remain strong. And I believe there's certainly a lot of room for compromise, right? Whether that is agreeing to a fixed number of imports to the Polish market, if it's agreeing to some sort of subsidy or price stabilization mechanism where the Polish government or even the EU agrees to, inject capital to maintain prices artificially high, or at least the price to farmers artificially high, while the market gets cheaper grain. There's a lot of options out there to solve this problem. It's not unsolvable, but the fact that probably Ukraine, I also sort of suspect, right? And it's a throwaway line here, but let's see if we can find it. It basically, in this article, here we go. It says Poland's military hardware has been depleted by about a third through transfers to Ukraine, and Warsaw's in the process of replacing it with modern Western-produced kit. So what I sort of suspect is that Poland, right, remember, who also is very directly threatened by Russia, has said, hey, listen, Poland takes its defense very seriously, and it likely said, hey, we don't want to deplete our own military below a certain level, right, without like backfilling it. And so they probably identified a third of its military capacity as to say, hey, we can't become an anemic military in an effort to support Ukraine, right? We can't, and that's no good. So they've probably, I think there's a medium chance that Poland was going to pause weapons transfers anyway until they get plussed back up by modern NATO equipment. And then they would start to turn over another, 10-20% of old equipment to Ukraine, right? Just to maintain their total military hardware capabilities inside a band. So it's possible that they said, hey, if this was the plan anyway, let's use it to improve the deal we have with Ukraine over grain. This is very political stuff, guys. This is the deep political wrangling that sometimes doesn't even make the news. If Poland wasn't trying to, or Poland or Ukraine wasn't trying to bring this into the press. But this is the kind of horse trading that is part and parcel to keeping a group of allies together. Remember, the interests of Poland are not just the interests of Poland. They're the interests of Polish manufacturers, Polish farmers, Polish voters, Polish teachers, right? They all individually in a democracy end up having a stake, and politicians have to keep them all happy and also direct their country on the international sphere. So bringing together democratic allies is hard stuff. And this is an example of why. All right, taking a look at one last update. Again, we know ISW at this point. They report that Russian military command is on the brink of collapse basically every week for the past year and a half. But it does sound like there's some more confirmation, first off, that morale is dropping because word has gotten out among Russian troops that Ukrainian forces destroyed an entire regiment and almost an entire retreating assault group. The servicemen, these are servicemen outside of Andriivka and Klachivka, who have apparently been ordered to form an assault group and attack in the Bakhmut direction with basically no preparation. Like we talked about, right, Russian attacks generally use fires to prepare the battlefield. It sounds like they've sort of abandoned those tactics and they are just desperately rushing at Andriivka and Klachivka. Artillerymen are reporting that shells do not explode when fired, which they say is a symptom of Russia's defense industrial base, but could also be if they have already received some North Korean rounds. Could be due to age or just poor maintenance, and that all in all, these commands feel like they are a little bit falling apart. And the Ukrainians are, of course, continuing to push, continuing to attrit Russian forces, and really attempting to make some gains. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you for today. It's certainly a lot of news. Thank you to all the members of CombatVetNews.com. Appreciate you guys so much. All of our Colonel tier members, all of our Lieutenant tier members. I couldn't do this without any of you guys. And I appreciate all the members of Combat Vet News. See you in the next one. Cheers.